is unfolding that this person was not just killed, but that cut into pieces, as they're describing it. And so that is a story that's very challenging, but which journalism has also approached in a very careful way, and also cast an aspersion on journalists, like to what extent should they be involved in government? Jamal Khashoggi, you know, he was set to get married. He was supposed to get married, if I'm not wrong, that same weekend he disappeared. And I think that makes it even more intriguing. He's somebody who is a journalist, has relations with 2 different governments and on 2 different continents. And then if he's supposed to be getting married now, there's a romantic side to it. So that makes it, and he's also a journalist. So how do journalists write about themselves when they're caught up in a situation like that? That's a very good question. That's a very good question. How do journalists write about themselves?
It is the same thing. You know, what is the story behind that story? There is a lot in terms of getting the information. The journalists, and for example, our colleague Jackie Maribe, it's the same story. And my heart bleeds sometimes when I see the headlines. And I ask myself, do we really care? Are we human beings, or are journalists also, I mean, just robots? For example, Jackie Maribe's story. What exactly have we told the country other than, you know, waiting for her to be arraigned in court and telling stories about so-and-so killed the other person, there is a crime of passion involved. But beyond that, what are we telling the people? What more are we getting out there? We're going off course, but you've triggered something that now I have to ask. I just have to ask Nyakundi, how different would you have told this Jackie Maribe story, or what have we missed? First of all, is Jackie Maribe one of us? The story has turned from TV journalist, you know, TV personality, and we are suddenly talking about how she got involved with Joey, how, was it about money, was it about love, was it but I asked myself, Jackie Maribe, the Jackie that I know, who is telling her story? People are suddenly talking about a crime that she may not have been involved. I don't want to throw the spanner in the works. Let the investigations and the agencies do their part. But Jackie Maribe is somebody that we have sat down with, is somebody that has a human face, is somebody that before this incident happened was a human being. She's someone's daughter. Monica, who passed on, God rest her soul in peace, is somebody's daughter, is somebody's sister, and we are not getting into that side of the story. We are talking about crime, and the principle of innocence until proven guilty has been thrown under the bus. All right, so let's get back on track to Kassam. For you, perhaps the story or journalist that stood out for you? Maybe I would mention, actually I was going to say the disappearance of the journalist, but I specifically wanted to commend the Washington Post in terms of their bold coverage on this issue. I've actually been following most of the coverage around his disappearance from the Washington Post, because they've been consistent and holding on to the story. Locally, of course, that is one of the issues we'll be discussing. I was really moved by the accident that happened, you know, and we lost over 55 lives. I only feel sad that it quickly disappeared from the, you know, from the headlines and from coverage, compared to the other, you know, stories where that have sustained themselves, you know, repeatedly over time. But when you talk about the statistics and the numbers, you know, of people who have died, I think we should have done a little bit more around that story. And allow me to just pick it up from there. Now that we're in Newsroom, and you've already touched on one of the things we want to talk about is the road accidents and the road safety. You say that we went too fast. We moved on too fast as the media when it comes to telling that story. What should we have done different? Okay, so here we are. We've broken the news. We stayed on it for 2-3 days. Even a week, right? But then what after? What other stories do we need to do or to give in regards to road safety? Because God forbid, we're going into Christmas season. So a lot of traveling will be done, and a lot of accidents will be seen happening because of the ignorance and the corruption, and it's a whole bowl of mess that we see on our roads. Then what more can we do to tell these stories? Now, I would want to say this. First, the statistics are there in terms of the number of people we lose on the roads every year. It's about 3,000, which is unacceptable. Now,
our coverage around these issues is always event-driven. When there's an accident that has happened, there's uproar, and we say so much. And I'm happy, actually, the TV stations, most of the media houses, but the TV stations actually gave this issue a lot of focus in terms of what happened and trying, to capture the numbers and all that. But what happens is after the story breaks and after we cover that issue, we don't always go beyond to try and, dig a little bit deeper and also put responsibility where it belongs. It is actually unacceptable that every year we have to lose an average of 3,000 people. And after the uproar, dies down, then nothing else beyond that. It will be important that we move this a little bit further. I know, and if you see, there's been a lot of coverage and pieces written around the causes of accidents on the roads. I think those ones are well detailed. But I think in terms of saying where is the gap and what is the problem, last year, December, we lost about 300 people through road accidents. NTSA, and I think this was the, the head of NTSA, that is a major, he came out and said that this year we are going to introduce new speed limiters, digital speed limiters that will be relaying information real time to NTSA so that we can actually, take action on these drivers and, the operators and all that. There is very little that has happened after that in terms of even now for us, I would say, as the media, in terms of trying to see the responsibility of NTSA and the actions they have taken, because the blame squarely lies on them and also cabs.
Right now they're off the roads. Remember they were removed from the roads?
Exactly, but their mandate did not change in terms of, and by the way, if you read the mandate of NTSA, they're actually supposed to conduct, research and information around road accidents. They're supposed to actually come up with regulations. They're supposed to do campaign around road safety and all that. So it will be important, the agencies and the bodies that are charged with the responsibility of ensuring safety on our roads, cabs and the police and all that, we actually put the spotlight on them to insist that they do what they are supposed to do and hold them accountable.
This is what President Kenyatta said, and I'm coming to Anthony because he's a communication expert here. He says as authorities investigate the cause of the accident with a view of taking action, I would like to remind our drivers to always exercise caution to avoid such catastrophic incident. There was another tweet that followed that, of course, President Kenyatta then sending his condolences. But Anthony, that's where it stopped. The president just tweeted, and then that was it, right? So from our communication experts, and now what's on air is Deputy President William Ruto's tweet. But from a communication expert, what do you read of it? What do you make of it? Here are 56 Kenyans who have lost their lives, a tweet, and then that's it. Yet this is something that has been on the news, on the newspapers, for an entire week. A week later, here we are, and we're even still discussing it, but the president just sent out 2 tweets.
I think in communications, when we say in communication that general statements are really meaningless. That's too broad a statement. It has no specificity at all. It's not targeting anyone, and it's not saying anything new. I could take that tweet and wait for next year for something like that to happen, and then send the same exact tweet, and it would have no impact, no significance whatsoever.
Do you genuinely believe that the media did justice in keeping people accountable, from NTSA, the bodies that are relevant, to the owners of this Western Bus Express, to even President Uhuru Kenyatta at the top level, him being the head of this nation? Did the media do a good job? Or how would you grade us in saying, okay, fine, 56 people have lost their lives. Yeah. Corruption, where were the police commandants? But when it comes to taking a look at who is responsible, have we done justice?
I think we have not done justice, and first of all, I think what President Kenyatta did is something that even I can do, that anybody can do. So in that case, he didn't do much.
140 characters.
No, he didn't do much. That we cannot give him any credit for that. The media did a good job of first uncovering this story. This is something that happened earlier in the morning, wee hours of the morning, on a day that there was a controversial return of Moi Day, but they followed it up. The challenge that we might have, also the media can have sometimes in situations like this, is that you don't know who to go to when something like that happens. Do you go to the base commander, traffic controller? Do you go to the IG, who has not really said much about it? Do you go to NTSA? And as Dr. Harry here is saying, NTSA have actually been taken back to a desk job now. That's what they're doing. Nothing was changed, everything remained, but they're not on the roads. Or do you go to the traffic commandant? Who do you go to for such kind of information? And the media actually had it at first, I thought, because they interviewed people who talked about what actually transpired before they were moved from one bus to another and shuffled from different buses to that night. But I think the media's dilemma last week was that last week was a Merry Christmas week for the newsroom. Aside from the politics of the referendum, there was the Obado and Maribe bail application hearing.
Right.
There was these landslides in Uganda.
Right.
And then there was Bobby Wine in Kenya, Kanye West in Uganda. and then you come locally, Harambee Stars and 50 million shillings that have been fronted if they win and on the brink of success.
And we're coming to that.
I think that last week was just a very busy week. But the media must not ignore the political economy of road transportation in this country.
And that's the thing, Nyakundi, right? Here you are, you're doing stories that are, should I say, politically led, in the sense that we all know in journalism there's the who, what, where, when, the 5 W's and the 1 H, that we learn in school. And what if the person you need to quote is someone in government, but they won't pick up your calls, they won't return your letter, there's no formal communication, yet you really need it for your story? Then what happens? Because that means at the end of the day, as journalists, as the people who, as a fourth estate, and we ask questions on behalf of the community, when we go out and say, okay, so can we get a statement from NTSA? Can we get a statement from the president's office? Can we get a statement from the people who, from the Western Express bus owners? But nothing comes out of it. Doesn't that not go to impact how a journalist tells a story?
Well, that is very true. But just to go back a little bit, this is what I call the template, typical template story. An accident happens. By there I can tell you. Someone like Anthony said here, you can be sure that next year or next time an incident like this happens.
A few months from now.
The next time, even if it happens today, a tweet like that would come from the presidency, it will come from the deputy president's office, and all of us, even in the newsroom. By the way, that is what I call the template intro. 55 people have perished in a grisly road accident. I can almost tell you what it is going to be like. But just to respond to you, we are coming down to the fact of our bad manners as a country. We are a country of bad manners, and I'm sorry to say that. First of all,
from the citizens themselves.
We are a country of bad manners. I'll tell you, 250 kilometers from Nairobi to where that accident happened, nobody even thought about checking out that bus, for example. And I'm sorry, the owner, I know him. He's a friend in other circles because he also supports a football team, and I'm a sports journalist. So I know him personally. But I'm also asking myself, 250 kilometers, we are waiting for an accident to happen for my friend Major to come out in the media and the IG to tell us, oh, this story, this bus, this, the other thing. Come on. And what are we telling ourselves?
And for me, that's the issue. The root causes and the solutions we also need to know. Because I know we discussed a bit about, the body structure. We spoke about the, the roads, the state of the roads, the rescue operations. And one of the things we have seen whenever there is an accident, speed is always an issue. And in terms of, and the roads were not marked, of course. But when we talk about, for example, the issue of speed.
72-year-old man behind the wheel.
Yes, and that. So I was saying, in terms of the causes, most likely we know what are the causes. But in terms, and the law, by the way, Kenya has some of the best laws when you talk about, dealing with the road safety. It is enforcement that is the issue. Because if you cause, death through reckless driving, the penalty actually is, could be life in prison or death penalty. But in terms of solutions, and that is what I am talking about, what are we doing to curb speed, for example? What are we doing to address, we have unmarked roads, and that has, I've driven by there on that road. Yes. It's very uncomfortable to drive on that road. It's been there for a while, but what have we done about this? What are we doing to enforce the issue of violation and tampering with speed governors, the violation of speed limits that we have actually said, the role of the police on the road now that we don't have NTSA on the road, and the police are what are they doing?
But Dr. Sorry, again, it is the bad manners. And I'll tell you, when somebody boards a vehicle that is full, we have all been involved in situations like that. When you tell someone, this vehicle is full, they tell you, boss, imefika usiku, tumechelewa, kunanyesha. It is down to our mannerisms as a people. Because let me tell you, it is not just about the police. It is not just about NTSA. The question is, what level of responsibility do the citizens take in terms of their own, adherence to the same laws that we have put there for ourselves, constitution that we have passed? And at the end of the day, it is not, a police officer is not there to even go back to our homes.
Okay.
Do you have,
I hear you.
do you have a cop in your house?
Gentlemen,
On this particular,
let us not blame the victim in
Yeah.
terms of
on this, no, on
responsibility.
this particular
NGSA,
accident, on
police,
this,
KEBS, the ministry.
let's hear also
on
Anthony's
this
thoughts.
particular accident, I blame the government. I blame the government right from the ministry. I blame the government from all the institutions that have the mandate to support and to transport. I blame the National Highways Authority. I blame the NTSA, and I blame the police. When I'm going out there to try and board a vehicle, it is my expectation that any vehicle that's on the road has insurance, has been licensed by TLB, is supposed to be operating in that route, has a qualified driver, and it will deliver me to where I'm going safely.
Because we need to move on, gentlemen. I need to give Anthony the last say on this one. Here's the thing, Anthony, and you clearly put it very well. There's so much that happens between now and then that we report on a lot, and you gave a perfect example of how last week was. Given the example of how fast Kenyan media moves, is that a reflection of also how fast society moves from an accident or a scenario, be it Solai Dam, be it the 12 babies in hospital, be it this strategic this accident? One moment. And the thing is, Anthony, I want you to compare that as you answer with the fact that, let's say, if this were 5 members of parliament or this were 5 dignitaries who also passed away, we would still be talking about it right now. Probably the President Uhuru Kenyatta would be more angry than just a 140 tweet, condolence.
That's for sure. And,
right.
I think that, like Nyakundi is saying, it's our bad manners. And the bad manners in such a situation is that there are no consequences for when something like this happens. There are no consequences. Nothing is going to happen to the people in the ministry. Nobody is going to claim insurance. So there's no insurance company that's going to be compensating these people. And the government will not be compensating these people. And nobody is going to hold media accountable.
Does the media move too fast, which shows how the society also moves fast?
The media cannot be blamed because the media moves based on what is happening and what is current. True. And so the media can actually move away from a story, even if they didn't want it, because if something prominent happens...
And the Maribe story alive for almost 2 months.
Exactly. But that is media nepotism, which you cannot allow. That is media nepotism. It's one of their own.
The shelf life of a story in typical Kenyan context is about 2 weeks, and most of the time, even the Obado story, we are not talking about it until he is back in court, he is denied bail, then we talk about him, Kukula Maragwe and Skumawiki. The point is this.
We'll be damned.
The point is this. Media does not just create its own stories. You sit in an editorial. This headline is not a one-man affair.
Yes.
There's actually a whole team that sits and sifts through all these issues before that headline comes out. The point is, media, again, man bite dog or dog bite man. That principle will always apply. You're not going to have a headline. You're not going to have a headline.
To get facts on Maribe and Obado right now than you want to get facts on what exactly happened in Fort Tenan.
And speaking of facts, let's touch on Rio Olympic scandal. And I'm glad that we have Nyakundi today, given that he's a sports veteran journalist. First of all, here's the thing. Let me just set this pace for you. This was in 2016 when this Olympic Games scandal, when then former CS Mr. Hassan Wario was the CS for sports. Right now, he's an ambassador to Austria, so keep that in mind. His PS, the former PS, Mr. Richard Ekai, who's also involved in this same scandal, is now an ambassador to Russia, all right? So here's the thing. At the heart of it, we have 15.5 million Kenyan shillings. 2.4 million of it was embezzled. How? 16.9 was used to buy plane tickets. 16.9.
Exaggerated.
Exactly.
Overpriced.
Another 15.9 million was used as overpayment for allowances. And another 6.6 was expenditure on unauthorized persons. I'm guessing these are people who traveled and were not even supposed to travel. Girlfriends, relatives, according to what
people who are not athletes.
That's the thing. And Nyakundi, I'm going to begin with you since this is your area of expertise, right?
Yeah.
So here you are. You have the CS and the PS himself, Mr. Richard, back in 2016, Olympic scandal happened. And may I just emphasize the fact that there were cash bonuses that were supposed to go to the athletes from the likes of Nike, and they never saw a dime, right? One moment. These same people, these same individuals out of 7 are now become ambassadors. What is President Uhuru Kenyatta saying as he's also trying to tame the dragon of corruption? Isn't this not just a reward as a way of saying, Tulia, go retire, become an ambassador?
Okay, 2 things. First of all, when this whole thing happened, I am on record I actually did write to some of my colleagues, and a very senior colleague was actually on my neck for what I said. Second, Dr. Wario was a personal friend. I think when all this was happening, I had occasion to also, speak to him and sometimes advise him on some of the things. But I think let's get to what the elephant in the room is. It is a question of how we mismanage our public affairs. One of the things is I've also had occasion to travel with some of our teams out there. And I'll tell you, again, comes back to the bad manners that I will keep referring to. If people can't perform, simply don't shift them from this point to another, because I think at the end of the day, even as an envoy, as an ambassador, these people are still serving the country. What we must tell ourselves, what we must ask is, how was money, first of all, given? How are these processes managed? Because I'll tell you, 55 million shillings, we'll make all the fuss about it because Kenyans, athletes, and Honorable Wesley Korir raised this whole matter. But there are too many other things that are happening that are not right. Our athletes, our sportsmen and women are being mistreated every other day, and nobody talks about it unless it is a big scandal. There is a CS involved, there is a PS involved, but it is just too bad because I interact with a lot of these people and we are not doing justice to these men and women who bring a lot of glory to our country. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, a colleague, is right now fighting with a government agency that took his photo. They have not paid for it. They are using it for an advert. Again, a very big agency, but nobody is going to talk about it because there is no mention of Kipchoge Keino in that. But my friend is suffering.
All right, gentlemen, let's throw it back a little bit. I want us to jog our memories. Deputy President William Ruto, not so long ago, especially when they were campaigning for Jubilee when we were going to elections, one of the biggest promises was to build stadiums. That song was sung so many times. Here we are in 2018. Stadiums are not there. Take a look at what he said.
Starts about the stadia. It became a big issue. I am pleased to announce that 5 stadia will be complete by April, and 4 will be complete by June this year. And we have made, some of them we have built from scratch. Some, like Nyayo Stadium and Kasarani, we have refurbished. And we are combing through our budget again to see the new ones that we want to develop going forward. And when I say the stadia, I mean in far-flung areas. In Marsabit, we have a stadia that will be complete in 2 months. World-class stadia, IAAF compliant, that can be used by football, stadia in Makueni, in Meru, in my hometown in Eldoret, in Kamarin, and on. And so we've spent almost 4.2 billion shillings to get this stadia up and running, and we will work with counties to continuously ensure that sports infrastructure is developed. Allowances that were expected for this match to move on, though it delayed initially, but all the monies now have been released by yesterday. A total of 25 million shillings is now available for you guys to prepare for this match, and all the other allowances will be paid. And going forward, we know we have 2 commitments we have made. One is that we must have an official bus for Harambee Stars. And I want to commit that next month, that bus will be available for your use. If you give us this win, the government of Kenya is going to give 50 million shillings to Harambee Stars.
Big talk, no action. Anthony, because of time, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Number one, 4.2 billion Kenyan shillings. So till today, we do not know where that 4.2 billion Kenyan shillings that he promised, or rather that he said is going into stadiums is, because we can't see a stadium worth 4.2 billion Kenyan shillings. Here's the thing, Anthony, as a communication expert, what are your thoughts? Isn't this not purely just lying to Kenyans in broad daylight when you say, we're going to do this, and we've put aside money, and money has been allocated, and money has been released, and these are the grand projects we want to do 5 years down the line?
I think, let me just say that I feel very sorry for the DP because he's found himself in a situation where he has to be consistent in something that is not true, and has had to talk about the possibilities of elevating sports in this country at a time when things are actually not even being elevated. And I have just nothing but pure satire for Kenyan sports. And I'll start by saying that Nyayo Stadium, as is right now, is not fit to even host a riot. There was some work that was supposed to have been done for the CHAN Championship, which was never held. In fact, we had the people who were in charge of the CHAN organization coming on television and saying that they had everything ready, including accommodation and everything, but the stadium. They did not have the stadium ready. The other thing that I'd like to say is that all the people who never promised to deliver stadia to Kenyan people, who were governors, actually ended up delivering it. We have Oparanya, we have Munya, who did Meru, and then we have Joho, who did Mombasa. They're not talking about it, but it's possible now to have a very good sporting event at Mbaraki Sports. And in fact, it was actually certified as a potential for hosting Sekafa championships.
Nyakundi is so frustrated he's laughing in studio. All right, so Dr. Sam, here's the thing, and I would love for you now we need to start closing up the conversation. Deputy President William Ruto, as you've had, promised them a new bus, 50 million Kenyan shillings and so forth. Of course, they won the game. If they lost the game, surely a bus to the national team in Kenya. We are promising them a bus if they win. Isn't this not already, should it not be already a necessity, whether they win or lose? It's a basic need for the national team.
First, of course, as the media, we have the responsibility of holding public officials accountable to the things they say.
Right.
And you've seen the promises that were made that we have now been using as jokes on social media, the promises that were made that were not delivered. But it goes also to the heart of how we manage sports in this country, how we treat our athletes, how we treat our sportsmen, the funding of sports, and also the management of these funds. And one of the things, by then, I'm happy with the media around the coverage of the Rio fiasco. When it happened, the media consistently actually covered these stories, went, dug deep and, displayed and highlighted what went wrong and all those issues. And it's a good thing that we are finally seeing some action happening. But what I want to say is that our sportsmen and women should not be at the mercy of charitable donations from politicians who are seeking political mileage when such an issue happens. What we need to see is better administration of sports, of the federations, management of sports, and also taking sports seriously in this country. So that you don't just say that, when you win, we are going to give you 50 million, I will also make a personal donation of 3 million, when their allowances are not being paid. You remember, and I know Nyakundi would remember that time when our, Harambee Stars were to play, I think, Cape Verde, and they were given a small plane that was actually not safe, and they ended up camping in an airport without taking a shower, the aircon was not working, and they actually ended up performing well in that kind of a match. So we do not want these promises that are made and, talking big, while we're actually mistreating our sportsmen, we're actually not paying their allowances, we are not paying their dues. The coach has actually been complaining about unpaid dues, and here you are making promises that, oh yeah, we'll give you 50 million, if you do this, we'll do this. But it is actually an issue of holding these people accountable. And the media, and like I have said, it's a good thing we focused on the Rio fiasco, and we are seeing now the issues, finally people are going to be held accountable. We must continue with this to make sure that we are taking sports more seriously and doing the right thing.
And here we are spending 16.9 on tickets, on plane tickets. Nyakundi, I'll let you have the last say, because one moment, Nyakundi, because I can tell you have so much. The reason why I want you to have the last say is because I want us to put the spotlight on us again, because this is the newsroom. Yeah. We talked about earlier, and this is something that even on social media, Kenyans really pointed out, that one, no local media house aired the game, Kenya versus Ethiopia, and it's right here in our own backyard. Number two, when Kipchoge won the Wall Street wrote a better, and they covered it, these international media houses covered that win so much better than we local media did. Talk to me, as a last comment, about perhaps the logistics that we need as a newsroom, as media houses, to make sure that we tell our sports stories better, especially sports stories that even go beyond Kenya, if our athletes go represent us internationally.
Several issues that I could talk about. And for the record, I was on that plane to Cape Verde. I think that is the longest I've flown across Africa. We did about 15 hours from Nairobi to Cape Verde. But two things. Sorry. It is a shame that I listen to the Deputy President say the kind of things he says. One, he's promising 50 million shillings if you win. On what budget? Okay? There is a Sports Act in place. Okay? The national teams facilitation, not just football, but national teams. Article 4 of the Sports Act is a function of Sports Kenya. Okay? How much money does Sports Kenya have from this year's budget? Your guess is as good as mine. Less than 1 billion shillings. Okay? But the Deputy President comes and tells us of 4.2 billion. Where? When we don't have a stadium called Nyayo. When we could not host Chan because we don't have stadiums. And when Kasarani has been done courtesy of a corporate institution that had interest in hosting Gor Mahia against Hull City. The surface that we see is not a function of government.
And on the issue of media covering the sports stories?
Media coverage, again, I would go back. Grounding in terms of information, in terms of research, in terms of understanding, for example. When the Deputy President talks about 9 stadia, first of all, no journalist has gone back to the law to interrogate that statement because it is not a function, sports infrastructure. Yes, Jubilee made that promise in 2012, going to the 2013 elections, but is it a function of the national government? No. It is a function of the county governments to develop sports infrastructure, sports talent. Of course, the national government has that overriding,
but the core mandate is at county.
But then it is the counties. If you read the Sports Act, we are supposed to have a national sports development plan. And I'll tell you, Croatia, that played in the World Cup finals, is not guesswork. They have a plan that every 8 years they are reviewing, and that is how you see this talent coming out, the Luka Modric and other players coming through.
All right.
So the point that we must, and it is an indictment on myself and our colleagues in media, we must be able to tell Kenyans the truth. And the truth is that a lot of these things that are being said, they're all lies. And I'm sorry to say, the media picks that story and says, oh, the Deputy President has promised you this, but it is based on what?
And that's
which budget?
That's where
when was it approved? Well, I mean, it is a whole lot of issues that I can talk about. There's a lot of ignorance of the law, especially my colleagues in sports media. They have not read the Sports Act. I can tell you that for a fact. They have not read the budget in terms of what has been allocated to sports. And I can tell you, sports gets about 5 billion shillings. 70% of that money goes into recurrent expenditure in terms of paying salaries, in terms of for government officials and civil servants. Okay. There's very little that goes into development. A whole story we can talk about.
Yes, Nyakundi,
any other.
We need to put a full stop on that because of time. We can spend an entire week on just
I get very emotional on these things because it's a shame. It's a shame actually.
And let me pause you there because we will continue for so long and then we have bills to pay. All right, so I'm very passionate. Milton Nyakundi, he is a veteran journalist, hence why he's so passionate like that. At the center, Anthony Okonji, he is a communication expert, and sitting closer to me, that was Dr. Sam Kamau. He is a lecturer at the Aga Khan University. Let's take a quick commercial break and sort of digest this. Thank you so much for sticking with us. We'll be right back.
This is KTN News.